So we're just gonna have a random tale just in this, apparently.
That's cool with me. I love cats.
All right. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? My name is Becca Bears, and as you know, I'm a librarian at the Rogers Memorial Library in Hudson, New Hampshire. I'm pleased to say we have almost every one of your books.
Oh wow, yeah. That looks like definitely most of them.
Put a little to display them on for you.
Very nice. Well, thank you for having me. Do you do a lot of these, like, is this a video interview series at the library?
I think it's going to be, but this is actually my second one ever.
Oh, cool. All right.
I had a lovely conversation with Shobha Rao, authors of Girls Burn Brighter, yesterday.
Excellent.
Yeah. But I think it's going to be a thing. And I think that doing a video interview series with authors will increase the amount of circulation of the patrons checking out books and expose them to new books. So that's awesome.
Yeah, hopefully. Very cool. Okay, fair warning, there will probably be like an interruption with like many of my dogs barking because like my husband is due home at any time and they always bark when their dad arrives, and then we're expecting like an appointment sometimes. So there will be like huge barking dogs at some point. I hope that's fine.
That's fine. I grew up with Labradors.
Okay, yeah.
So I guess my first question is, so I've reread every one of the books this past week for the third time because I've been since 2011. Right. I've always been reading I've been a huge fan. And so as a librarian, I do readers advisories with young readers a lot. And one thing I've noticed is that currently in YA, there's a lot of emphasis on female main characters. And I thought it was really interesting that for your first YA series, you started with Cassio, who I hold very dear. I love Cass. It's actually more difficult than you might think to find books with that for that demographic. Was it hard to write outside of the usual kind of main character to get into the mindset of Cassio, or did he just kind of like appear ready?
Well, all of my characters, if they're good characters, they appear ready. And Anna Dressed in Blood was my first book, so I really didn't realize that it was anything outside of the quote-unquote normal, female writing female or whatever that is. Yeah, so no, Kaz was a really easy character to write. He was very, very easy to work with. He was always, very willing, very adventurous. He and I share our senses of humor are probably the closest.
I love
of all the other characters. Like he and I, we really get each other's jokes. I mean, and he's very, for being so guarded and full of like defense mechanisms with the outside world, he was very open with me. So I appreciated that. And it made the book very easy to write. The Anna books, for that reason, because Kaz was such a great narrator, are, I would say, the easiest. They were definitely the easiest of my books to write. So I miss him. I hope he's not dead. I wish he'd come back around again, but so far I haven't heard from him since the end of Girl of Nightmares. And also, I just don't think, I find it so weird that boys are so hesitant to read about a female protagonist. It's like, it's strange. Girls are people, boys are people. Girls don't have a problem reading about boys. It's not weird to read about, you're not a fairy either, man. But you can still read about a fairy and
that's what I tell them too.
Like you're not a vampire, and I don't think, gender-wise, the differences between you and this character, it's not like, oh, it's a girl vampire, that's why she's so different from you. No, she's a vampire, that's why she's different from you. So yeah.
After rereading, I've noticed that it's very easy for a hero to become a villain and villains to become heroes, especially with Catherine, Cassandra, and Anna. And what I really noticed was that there are lots of outside forces. They think that they know what their history is and what their story is. For example, Cass and the Queens. But there's actually this outside forces like the Black Council, the Muses, or the fates, and other forces at work that how do you pronounce the order of, I meant to ask, in Anna, the order of the...
Don't ask me. It's like Celtic, so I can't
Okay.
pronounce that either. But it's like the closest pronunciation is like a Bidak do, which is not, it is not. I can know that in my mind, and still, even when I read it, I just read it phonetically. So, pronounce it however you like. You could just call it the BD if that makes it easier
I
for you,
like
because it
that.
makes it easier for me.
It seems like one of the messages in the series is that nobody's good or bad. It can take these outside forces to set you over the edge. Did certain characters from earlier series kind of help inform other characters from the Three Dark Crowns as you were writing them?
At least not consciously. I mean, I really feel that my characters are like their own entities, like they exist in another dimension and are just living their lives after I finish telling their stories. So each one is very unique to themselves, but I'm sure that the act of writing them is it affects the next one down the line in ways that I'm not even consciously aware of. But I mean, that's like a theme in my books. I think that I don't believe in villains. I don't believe in heroes. I think we're all just doing the best we can, and some days we're buttholes, and some days we're not so bad. And that's basically how I view all my characters. So just because somebody does like an unforgivable thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that you do is going to be unforgivable. Some of the things they do are going to be heroic and good and kind, just like the rest of us. And you can be like really, really mean to one person and like a really great friend to another person, and that is just the
Like
way of,
karma.
yeah. So.
Sorry if that was a silly question.
Oh no, that was good. Sorry, I got like interrupted because the cat's just like looping around here.
So in your first two series, while they were supernatural, they were set in the real world. So Thunder Bay, and then I'm totally blanked on the city that with Cassandra was in. It was
It's somewhere in upstate New York. I don't remember the name of it offhand either because the actual town was made up. But
and
it
while
was
they're
based
in
on
real places, there's still supernatural things going on, but there is an overarching mythology. But in Three Dark Crowns, you had to create a whole world with maps and everything. Was it fun to like work with a new geography, a new culture, to basically create one, as opposed to the first two, which were still grounded in a place in the United States? And it seems like maybe did you have to do a lot more research for a world that was made of just your imagination?
I mean, there are aspects of Three Dark Crowns that I had to do more research for. I had to do a lot of research on poisons. I had to do a lot of more research on old-timey things because the world is not in our world, but it's like sometime in the 1800s and also back further, 17, 1600s, depending on where you go. So I had to do research about that, like what kind of ships they would have, what kind of clothes that they would wear. And it was also freeing in a way. I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was putting a Dunkin' Donuts on the wrong street corner. I didn't have to worry about, how things work in Canada versus how things work in the United States school-wise. And I didn't have, so there are certain things that really lightened the research load. And as far as the creation of the world, I was kind of nervous because I'd never done it before. But once I like got to the island and just started poking around, it felt less like creating a world and a culture than it did just getting to know it. So even now in the fourth book, I'm still learning things about the culture that I had no idea of in the first book. And it's so, I mean, that's what makes kind of the act of writing these books so fun and rewarding for me, is that I get to bounce around in there and figure it out. If the books had stopped with the first two as was intended, I never would have known as much as I do about the oracles and the war gifted. I never would have gotten to go to Bastion City like I have gone to.
I
I've never would
love
have
the maps. It's everything. It
so,
almost reminds me of Game of Thrones, the intro. It's just so
oh yeah. I can't take credit for any of the maps. If you would have seen the sketch I gave the poor map artist, she's amazing. I basically gave her what looked like a baked potato with some dots and words on it. So she took my baked potato and then she turned it into that glorious map of Fenburn with all of the mountains and castles and birds and things. And on the second map, the different map that's in Two Dark Reigns, I actually requested a sea monster. Even though there are no sea monsters in there, I'm just like, I like maps with sea monsters in them. I think they look cool. And she's like, sure, we can do that. So the sea monster in there in the other map, her name is Lola. And she's not in the books, but we love her very much.
She has a name? I wondered that.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, her name, my editor named her. She's like, I think she looks like a Lola. I'm like, she is a Lola.
I am hugely interested in how you can create maps of worlds that are completely new. But I also have wondered from from like a writer's point of view in craft world. So in the first two books, your first two series, it was there was Thunder Bay, there was London, there was New York, there weren't the underworlds. But then in the Three Dark Crowns, every chapter is really a different place, a different part, the characters are more spread out. There's more, every book, it kind of like adds a little bit to the world. As a writer, do you want to do one thing with a character and a character story, but then you realize, oh no, Jules and Camden are heading this way. I wanted them to do that. When can I get from this point to this point?
The further you get into the story, the less it matters what you want as a writer. And the more the characters are just going to do what they're going to do, and the story is going to go where it's going to go. Sometimes there are ways that if you're just dying to have an element appear in the book, you can make that element work for you.
Like Mirabella can make that element work for her.
In Game of Thrones, or not in Game of Thrones, in Girl of Nightmares, I really wanted to use Suicide Forest. And I could not figure out how, I'm like, I can't get them to Japan. That just wouldn't work. I cannot get them over to Japan. So I just moved it. I put a Suicide Forest in Scotland, even though there is not one there. But, that's like why it's fiction. So sometimes you can just use that fictional license to move things or to get things to appear where you need them to. But as far as characters, in my experience, it's usually best not to try to make them do anything because they're really going to fight you and it's not going to turn out the way that you want anyhow. So if Jules and Camden just decided to kick it off to wherever, I would just have to follow them and hope they would show up again or do something interesting and make them turn around or something like
I'm
that.
So scared for Mirabella and Jules.
Yeah.
I know it's going to rip my heart out whatever happens in September when I get it.
Yeah. It was tough writing. We're still kind of working on the last book. We're kind of behind schedule, but and I think that's partially because I didn't want to finish it because I knew it was the end and I wasn't going to be there anymore and I'm going to miss the island and I'm going to miss all of the queens and the characters a lot. But I mean, it is over now and I pretty much do know that this ending is going to stick. So yeah, it's upsetting. It's also upsetting just from an author standpoint because people have gotten so attached to different characters over the course of the series and they have hopes for how things are going to turn out. And a lot of readers' hopes are very different from other readers' hopes, and you know that you're not going to please everybody. Like, there's no way at the end of a series that you make all of your readers just sublimely happy. It won't happen.
If you do, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, you just have to do it. You just have to end it the way it's going to end.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, I'm watching the final season of Game of Thrones right now, obviously, as many of us are. And I know it's not going to turn out exactly how I want it to, and I'm just trying to, it doesn't mean that they're ending it wrong. It just means that I almost never get what I want as far as characters are concerned and other people's stuff. Like, it seems like every character that I get attached to dies. Every, ship that I never gets together. Like, I just don't have good luck when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Same. I was very attached to Marjorie, and I was very sad.
Oh, yeah. I like Natalie Dormer. I like her a lot.
Well, this kind of goes into my next question, which was, do you ever kind of get like like you especially in Three Dark Crowns, these characters really do go through the ringer, a lot of times.
Yeah.
So do you ever kind of like feel guilty for some of the things you put the characters through? And is that difficult as a writer,
No,
that writers?
because they're getting themselves into it. Like I'm just at the keyboard typing away going, girl, you should not be doing that right now, but I see that you're going for it, so you go right ahead. Like
You're
it's
just like,
never,
oh, this is a
never
train
feel
wreck.
like my stories are constructed. And when I see that bad ending or that bad turn of events coming for the characters, I always, I wince. This is not going to turn out well for you. And then sure enough, it doesn't. And I wish, I've wished that I could write my way out of a number of things, but it's cheap if I try to do that. It's a ripoff. So you just have to let it go. Three Dark Crowns, the world of Three Dark Crowns, I always knew that it was not a bright and happy place. It was going to be dark. It was going to be brutal. People were going to be lost, and there was going to be a price to everything. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that since they grew up there, they're prepared, but it's still not. It can't be easy for them.
Yeah. And speaking of, as we were mentioning before, villains aren't really, they're not just existing in a void. They're not all automatically bad. You often have characters who become villains. Do you ever sympathize with characters who are more villainous than, say, the main character who's the typical heroine? And do you ever kind of like root for villain-like characters in your books?
Oh, sure. I mean, Cersei Lannister is one of my favorite characters on Game of Thrones. And she does terrible things, but the important thing is I understand why she does them. So when it comes to villains, I just need to understand why you're doing these things. And I can say, wow, you're a dick. But it doesn't matter because I can still, at least empathize or get behind you. Or like a lot of the things, a lot of people think of Natalia Aaron from the first two books as being a villainess.
Which
But
is not.
like poisoners have a completely different system of morality. And to them, like if they poison you a little bit, if they leave some scars, well, big deal. They didn't kill you, So
I was very sad when
yeah.
Talia
happened. So I really loved writing her. She was a fantastic character. She was very clever, and she had like that hidden heart, like she had that hidden soft spot for Katarine completely. And that is like everybody else, like that was her good side. That was the good in her. And I think everybody has good in them, with one exception. I was never able to make Billy's dad anything more than a cookie cutter cardboard villain. I tried to give him more depth. There was actually, I wrote a short story for like a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition that was called Mainland Boys. That was a story about Billy and Joseph back on the mainland when he was banished. And the father was in that too. And I'm like, well, here's my chance. Here's my chance to get to know this guy from another perspective. He's in his element. He's with his son. Let's see. And he was just a dick there too. So he was, like every now and again you come across a person who's just bad all the way through. And that was Billy's dad. So he's my one-dimensional, totally crapped out villain all the way.
Because I think it was very interesting because honestly, I'm rooting for Catherine to get it because I don't like I know that Luca is the priestess. She's supposed to be this really nice sage advisor for Mirabella and for the first book or so, but I just, something about Luca is just,
No, she's Natalia's counterpart.
Yeah.
She's like the temple of Natalia. Like those two going head to head was one of the most exciting things for me to write. I love putting those two in a room together and just seeing the terrible, glances that they cast each other's way and all of the different things, all of the insults they would throw, while still having complete mutual respect for each other. Like they totally took each other seriously. They did not underestimate each other. So yeah, there is definitely more to Luca than meets the eye. But is she necessarily bad? No, but she wants Mirabella on the throne, and that is what she wants. And she'll do whatever she needs to make that happen.
My next question was, so I know I'm wrote these down because I was worried I would butcher the pronunciation. I'm not gonna ruin Daphne, but Iliana,
I just say Ilian.
Ilian. Okay, so was that a surprise? Did you always know there was gonna be the novellas like that were kind of focusing on? But did you always want to do that, or was it kind of surprising to be like, oh, there's another generation of
No, that was I mean, I knew it. I have a timeline of Queens that goes back basically almost to the beginning. So I know Fenburn's history, but I thought that was just going to be something that I would know as the author, just me. And then that's like background information that just informs the stuff that I put on the page. And then HarperCollins asked me if I could do a collection of novellas. And I was like, yeah, I know exactly which one I want to do. Like, I want to tell Elizabeth's story. Like, that's the other story. And initially, when I signed the contract for the next 2 books in the series, so Two Dark Reigns and Five Dark Fates, I wanted to do all of Ilian and Daphne's story as one book, and then the finale of the Queens as the last book. And they're like, well, I think we would miss the Queens too much if we just had one book where they just weren't in it at all. So we kind of combined that, which worked out much better. Because I did write all of Daphne and Ilian's story at one point, and then I just deleted it all.
during the first book, or was it
no, during the
a little
third book.
later?
So during Two Dark Reigns, I had written her entire story, and then I just chopped it up and put it into Arsinoe's dreams instead. So yeah, that was a lot of writing for seemingly no reason, but actually, I mean, I needed to do it, even though it ended up not being published and will never be.